She slides my mug away before it warms the table. The tea leaves form a crescent where my initials faded overnight, a lipstick kiss blooming on the rim. Her thumb hovers over the shared playlist, taps, and a new message flashes on my phone. See you tonight. From the name we never said aloud. I stay frozen, watching the light catch the tiny chip she never mentioned. The room feels like a dropped glass, ringing with the wrongness of her smile as the new song starts without warning. She doesn't look at me as she reaches for the kettle again, just lifts it like a familiar weight and sets it back on the stove. Steam curls up around the chipped lip of my mug, and the crescent of tea leaves still clings to the bottom, a quiet witness to the hours I spent alone last night. Outside, the street hums with the same weekday rhythm. Delivery bikes, the neighbor's laugh bouncing off the brick. She hums along to the lazy piano line, the one that always makes her tap the table with a single finger. I move to the counter, arrange butter and jam beside the sliced bread, the motion old as our shared breakfasts. The playlist cycles, the next track sneaking in behind the clink of dishes. She pats the cat awake with gentle insistence. It pads between my knees like it understands comfort is a practice. The small rituals stay in place. Lids screwed on, keys set in the same bowl. For now, everything happens in the soft glow of morning light. Steam curled off the ceramic mug as I slid into the booth. Noah had spread his coffee stirrer across the table like a defensive line. I pressed my palms flat, trying to keep them from quivering. His eyes flicked up for a second, then down to the newspaper, fingers tracing the headline with a restless rhythm. "You okay?" I asked, lowering my voice so the room wouldn't swarm us. He blinked hard and let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Just tired," he said, but his shoulders didn't drop. An awkward pause bloomed. He didn't look up as he slid it across to me. "For later, don't lose it." I unfolded it. A ticket stub from the jazz club we used to go to, edges frayed. The ink said something, something, no date. He finally met my eyes, and for a heartbeat, the distance wavered. "I can't talk about it yet," he said, words soft but firm. "Not until I know more." I nodded slowly, the paper trembling between my fingers. He turned away, and I didn't follow. The tension stayed, but the stub burned warm in my palm like a promise that the silence wasn't forever. He walked back toward the cafe. I stood alone by the mural, breath fogging the air, and let the city noise fill the gap until it was bearable. A car horn honked, a dog barked, and my reflection in the glass looked like someone waiting on shore for a tide that might still turn. Then he paused at the doorway and looked over his shoulder, just enough to see if I was still there. I lifted the stub slightly when he did, a thank you without words. He nodded once, a tiny, almost grateful shrug, before stepping inside. I watched the door swing closed, the cafe swallowing him, and I stayed rooted, the ticket still in my hand, a small tether for the conversation that had to wait. The rehearsal hall door was still open, a sliver of light spilling onto the sidewalk. I pressed the torn ticket stub between my fingers, breathing in the smell of cold metal and dust. Inside, a pair of stagehands laughed over cue sheets, and a shadow detached itself from the doorway. Noah. He stepped out, shoulders tight, eyes flicking past me once before they landed and held. "You couldn't wait 10 minutes?" he asked. But the edge in his voice was the same as the last time we pretended everything was fine. I tilted the stub toward him. "This was for tonight. You said we'd talk then. Something changed?" He grabbed the stub, thumbed the frayed edge, and said, "People were already asking if we were breaking up the scene. Maria even told me someone at the studio whispered you were planning a monologue. I told them you just wanted another rehearsal. The laugh died in his throat. When he stepped toward me, the light caught in his jaw, and he suddenly looked exhausted. There were rumors, I said, the words coming out harsher than I meant. Noah's mouth flattened. Rumors don't become real just because you hear them. That's what I keep repeating so I don't have to explain why I'm tense around you. I braced both hands on the stub. So you just keep repeating? The air between us stung from the silence that followed. His shoulders drooped for a blink, and his eyes flicked to the street behind me, the thread of light from the hall catching his profile. He sighed. I said I needed a postponement. He whispered, because the pause felt safer than answering the same question every person in this building asked me without knowing the answer. He dropped his gaze to the stub in my hand and almost let it fall. The weight of the paper pressed into my palm. I swallowed, moving closer, the hallway noise fading until it was only the sound of our breathing. So, tell me what question I keep missing. My voice shook, but the stub remained steady in my grip. Noah's thumb traced the fold, then he slid it into his pocket without looking up. I don't have another room to give you answers in today, he said. But for a second his lips twitched, more like a pain than a smile. Just don't keep pointing right at the cracks and pretending they shouldn't be there. I nodded slowly, the stub now a small cold weight against my hip. He turned to go back inside, and before he closed the door, he paused. I'll meet you after rehearsal, he said. Not because of the rumors, but because I know you're still trying to understand. Just, please, let's keep it between us. I stood there as the door shut. The hallway quiet, except for the rustle of set pieces being dragged back. The stub felt like evidence of something unspoken, but it also brought a sliver of relief. Noah hadn't shut me out entirely. I slid it into the pocket beside my keys, a tiny reward for sticking around. The rehearsal hall still smelled like stage sweat and wet wood as I stood inside the open doorway, fingers curled around the metal frame. The lights over the piano hummed, casting a thin halo on the floor. I could hear the muffled clack of someone pacing backstage. I didn't move until Noah appeared from the darkened wing, backpack slung off one shoulder, eyes flicking up and down the empty chairs. He didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against the railing, the way he always did to sound casual. You said you'd wait, he said, a tired line around his mouth. I dropped the ticket stub onto the floor between us. It thudded against the concrete. He followed my gaze. You said later, I said. Later is now. Noah closed his eyes for a second, and then opened them straight into mine. I knew talking in public wouldn't work. That's why I wanted after rehearsal. I wanted air without rumors drifting in. I stepped forward, the stub crunching under my sole. Then stopped dancing around it. I heard the director's version. You told her I was lying about the lines slipping, that I was scheming to take over your part. A muscle jumped in Noah's jaw. He didn't deny it. He slid down the railing and sat on the edge, one hand rubbing the back of his neck. I told her something, he admitted. I said things that made her question you. I didn't want you to get that second look because I felt like you were already playing me out of the scene. I laughed, short and sharp. So you betrayed me before I even knew there was a threat. He leaned forward. You didn't let me say it. I cut him off. Say what? That you resented me for being the one standing in the light? That you would feed the people who were already waiting to see me crumble? His hand clamped around the metal rail until his knuckles whitened. I saw you flinch when she asked about the tapes. I saw her shift when you couldn't answer. I panicked, I told her the story about you missing cues, the one I'd heard from others, and I made it worse because I wanted to protect my own spot. Protect? I echoed. You didn't protect me, Noah. You sold me. He stared at the floor for a beat, then lifted his face. I know, he said, and it doesn't undo anything. I can't take it back. Silence stretched out. The pounding of my heart filled the space. The old easy quiet was gone, replaced with something brittle. I dropped the stub at his feet. You wanted private? Here it is. But don't expect me to forget. He swallowed. I'm not asking for that. I turned to the piano, placed both palms flat on the keys, feeling the cold metal of the stand grind into my palms. Then explain why, I said. Explain why you let the rumors grow instead of telling the truth when it mattered. He stood and crossed in front of the piano, so close his shoulder brushed mine. I wanted to be the one you trusted, he said. But every time someone whispered about you, it felt like a knife in me. I thought if I could steer them away, they'd stop coming at you. I was wrong. I pushed his shoulder gently, not violently, but firmly enough to remind him of the line he crossed. You steered them straight into me. His shoulders slumped. I see that now. I stepped away from the piano and lifted the ticket stub again, tucking it into my jacket pocket. I need time, I said. Not to forgive, but to figure out if there's any reason left to keep trying. Noah nodded once, slow. I'll give you that space, he said, and I'll stop showing up expecting things to be the same. As I opened the door to leave, the air outside hit me with cold clarity. The hallway beyond hummed with people returning from class. Behind me, Noah didn't move. I didn't look back. I left him there with the studio lights still on, the confession hovering between us like smoke. The trust shattered, but the score still waiting to be played. The hallway outside the rehearsal room smelled like damp wood and spilled coffee. The fluorescent light above flickered as if it wanted to shut down before the rest of us did. The ticket stub was still folded in my palm, edges creased from pressure. The door opened. Noah stepped out, script pressed against his chest, shoulders tight. I didn't wait for him to break eye contact. You said after rehearsal, I said, voice hard enough to make him pause. Now. He flicked his eyes toward the stub before looking away. You deserved a break, he said. But his words caught. I didn't let him wrap them in rehearsed deflection again. I pushed past him into the narrower stretch of wall where posters peeled. Say it straight, Noah. Say why you lied before the director, why you told him I was chaotic and unreliable. My hand thrust the stub forward. This thing exists because you ran to him. You need to stop pretending you didn't. He swallowed. The corner of the poster peeled more as the hallway breathed around us. Noah ran a thumb along the spine of his script as if it was an anchor. I was scared, he murmured. But that was the wrong word for the way his jaw tightened. If I didn't, you chose to trade my trust for your comfort. The words left my mouth with the same sharp edge as the stub hitting the floor. I kicked it down the hallway. You don't get a moment of silence now. I'm not going to nod and pretend we still have a shared floor plan. His fingers loosened. I didn't mean to. You did mean to protect yourself. That's the truth. This hallway doesn't bounce back from that. I stepped closer, the air between us charged. I'm not asking you to apologize for performance. I'm asking what kind of person you are underneath those rehearsed excuses. I need to know things aren't still shifting under my feet every time you talk to the director. He leaned back against the lockers, eyes flicking to the stage door. "You keep talking about truth like you want me to confess to everyone," he said, voice low. "I said I was trying to protect you. That's still true." "Stop calling me out of it," I snapped, slamming a locker shut a little too hard. The echo ricocheted off the concrete. "I already live in that truth. So do you. This is an urgent demand, not a delayed conversation. Either you admit to the director what you told him, or I take it on myself and walk away from the partnership the moment this rehearsal ends." His shoulders dropped. His hands unclenched around the script. He dragged them down his thighs. "You'd walk away?" he whispered. I nodded. "You already took the smooth floor out from under me once. I'm not letting you tell me which parts of our past are solid and which are cracks." The tension spiked again, but this time I could see a softening in the set of his mouth. Not because he'd forgiven me, but because he finally saw I'd act. He lifted his gaze and met mine. "Fine," he said, barely audible. "I'll talk to him." I didn't relax. I only stepped back. "Then don't wait until tomorrow. Let it be part of what happens next. I'm not covering for you, not now." He nodded once. I turned, each step away clanging in the hallway, but I kept the stub in my pocket, a reminder that the fact of the betrayal stayed in my hands, not in words he might later soften. As I approached the stage door, I heard him whisper, "I'm sorry." The word didn't soften anything, but at least it wasn't silence. That was a small payoff. He couldn't deny the hole he made anymore. I stopped at the door, pressed my palm against the cold metal, and let the moment settle. The pain was still there, but so was the new obligation to confront it directly, without waiting another minute. The hallway smelled of damp stage paint and the faint burn of coffee someone left in a paper cup. I pulled a crumpled printed rehearsal log from the locker, smoothing it on the bench and lining up the dates with the director's name. Noah's face appeared in the mirrored lockers, already a blur on the other side of the corridor, barely registering me before his shoulders tilted away. No glance, no step forward, just a tightening of his jaw as he kept walking. The fracture was a hard line in motion. I shoved the log into a canvas tote and strode toward the director's office. A half-dozen castmates clustered near the door, but I didn't pause. The director looked up from a stack of script drafts, surprise waning as soon as I said, "You promised me a fair read. I'm here to make sure you hear the truth." Inside the office, he leaned back, fingers steepled. "You know the schedule, the expectations," he said. Noah explained. "That I'm unreliable," I cut in, slamming the log on the desk. "He said it protects his role." He lied. I pointed at the list of rehearsals where I showed up early, stood in for missing solos, handed Noah his own cue sheets when he arrived late. "Check the call board. Check the timesheets. I'm not begging for a position. I'm insisting the record is clear." The director reached for a pen, scribbled something, then stopped. "I can't undo what's already been said," he murmured. "It complicates politics." "Then don't let politics keep me in a narrative I didn't write." I grabbed a sticky note, stuck it to the log, and wrote in sharp letters, "Trustless is not worthless." I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm walking out unless you let me speak at the next crew briefing. Let the truth be public or it stays private. A pause. His lips tightened. If I open that door, Noah will storm out. He's not the kind of actor who just lets it go. Let him storm out. I slid a second document across. Rehearsal footage timestamps, emails where Noah promised to cover conflicts and then rewrote them to make me look flaky. I'm done being on call for his reputation. His gaze flickered to a picture on the shelf, a worn cast photo with everyone smiling, Noah front and center. "You're sure about this?" Absolutely, I answered. I showed up. I keep showing up without needing his approval. He nodded once, slow. Fine, I'll open the floor. You get 5 minutes in the briefing. No interruptions. I headed back through the corridor, the tote bouncing against my hip. Noah was yakking with another actor by the practice room. But when I passed, his eyes flicked to me like to something caught in a rearview mirror. Immediate dismissal. I met the glance for a heartbeat, then walked on, shoulders unweaving from the memory of needing that nod. In the rehearsal room, I dropped onto the stage floor, breath fogging the wood. I lit a match, carefully burned the ticket stub Noah gave me. Watching the edges curl, the ink blacken, the stub crack into ash. Not a celebration, a release. The ash went into the empty stage trash with a soft tap, final as a stage cue. I pushed to my feet, ran my hand over the worn floorboards, and walked straight toward the exit, head held level, a small satisfaction humming in my bones. Direction clear, fracture documented, dependence gone, next briefing scheduled. The tension wasn't gone, but the path forward now felt solid beneath my steps. The briefing room smelled of cold coffee and wet program sheets. I sat at the edge of the stage, palms flat on the wood, tapping a steady rhythm that echoed my breath. I pushed back a lock of hair, slid a leather notebook from under my chair, and aligned the notes so each paragraph fell into place. When Lena stepped in, clipboard in hand, I lifted the notebook with 2 fingers and set it beside the mic stand, then pressed my thumbs against the pulse point of my wrist, holding the pressure long enough to calm the tremor in my knuckles. You'll have 90 seconds before I call for questions, Lena said, lowering her voice. Keep it short, Sharp. I nodded and gave the notebook a slight shake. An old ritual for recalibrating, a reminder that nothing outside this stage could pull me off center. Lena glanced toward the doorway, where rehearsals still shuffled, and added, Noah's not supposed to come in. He understands the terms. Her tone carried the remainder of the hallway tension, like grit. He didn't stay outside. Noah slipped into the dim hallway at the edge of the room, eyes flicking from the crew to the table. I watched him without flinching, then lifted my head and met Lena's steadying look. She gave a tiny nod, the signal that the room was ready. The murmur dropped. At the sound cue, I stepped up, the low spotlight painting a rough halo around my shoulders. I spread my fingers over the mic, then let my hands rest on the stand. No dramatic flourish, just assurance that I was anchored in this moment. I'm here to clear the air, I said, voice even. The rumors about my reliability stemmed from decisions someone else made to prioritize their advantage. I'll let the facts stand on their own. The crew listened, faces folding into attention. The emotional peak came as Noah appeared at the doorway, a figure outlined by the corridor light. He lifted a hand, a gesture halfway between apology and interruption. I didn't step back. Noah, I said, looking beyond him to the crew. I won't silence this again to keep the peace. I'll not pretend we're back to where we were. I'm choosing peace that doesn't need your permission. Noah's jaw tightened. Then he dropped his gaze to the floor. He didn't move forward. The words sank into the hall. I recounted, syllable by even syllable, the lies whispered to the director, the rehearsals withheld. With each admission, the room exhaled. There was no plea, only the quiet arrival of what was true and settled. I finished by thanking the director for listening and the crew for giving me the floor. Lena clapped once, emphatic. A few others followed. Noah stepped back into the corridor and out of sight. The fracture remained. He stayed distant as the room buzzed back to life. After the crowd dispersed, one of the crew members patted my shoulder, eyes bright. "You didn't need him to do that," they said. I straightened the notebook, slid it back under the stage, and let my fingers rest against the wood. The air around me felt different, tense, yet unbound. I walked toward the hallway exit, shoulders squared, leaving whatever Noah's presence had stirred behind me. The words I spoke hung between the walls, unalterable, the set record settling like dust. The stage lights dimmed, leaving the hallway in long amber stripes, and the crew dispersed into murmurs that fluttered like trapped birds. I straightened, the quiet assurance of the filing of boundaries humming beneath my skin. The director nodded once. A baton of permission passed into my hands, and the crew's attention shifted toward the world beyond rehearsed lines. Noah stood in the doorway, a shadowed figure framed by cold glass, eyes darting away as if a gust of truth burned too bright. No pleadings crossed the gap now, only the rustle of a coat as he turned and moved back into the dark, refusing even the echo of a farewell. I stepped forward, shoulders unclenched, the air tasting like ashes and possibility, leaving the hallway to pulse again with my own quiet, steady heartbeat, knowing the bridge behind me had collapsed forever.